Hey, 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 everybody, live from Denver. It is Friday night. Welcome to Critical Conversations. Let me make sure we're all good here. I think we are. Yep, all good in the hood. Yes, we are. Well, you see, I am here this week. Mel has taken the week off again, and that is okay. Sometimes she just doesn't really want to be on the mic. And, she's working full time now, and we're going to give her her time. So that's what's happening. And you all just got little old me. So, yes, live from the Mile High City. Anyway, I hope everybody can see everybody in the chat and everything. Just looking at some of the early or the pre-show comments and everything. Leslie, I hope all is well. And, boy, what a time to be alive. There's still... oh boy, I don't know. I didn't even know where to start. I know. I hope that Melissa will come back next week for sure. I always enjoy having her here so much. But it is what it is. Thank you. By the way, if y'all didn't see, I did a live stream today with Ann and I think his name is Mark. Yes, from Landmark Forum. We did some survivors, some people from that activity have been watching a lot of my videos and work and stuff, and I've been working and talking with people in that community recently, and it's been a lot of fun. The X large group awareness trainings. LGATs. It's such an awkward term. It never has flowed smoothly as a descriptive term, but it does describe this group of, sort of, I'd say bizarre, but it's not really that bizarre because it's kind of been going on for so long and so many people kind of just accept that this is something they should go do, go to these weirdo Anthony Robbins style seminars and stuff and get all pumped and told all this stuff. And anyway, there's so much Scientology in Landmark Forum, and in just these groups are so what's the word? They rip each other off. They overlap in so many different ways because of the ways that they take from each other. But it's just really bad stuff. And as always, our methods of cult control can always be applied to those things to see how they're messing with people, and our models and ideas of cult recovery can apply to people who have come out of those situations, especially the people who were staff who really went deep on Landmark and worked for the organization and stuff like that. It's wild stuff. Okay, I also wanted to start the show with a couple comments. We're going to get to the Benson cam in just a sec, but I also wanted to comment on the fact that Rings of Power Season 2 is out now on Amazon. I did not watch Season 1. I watched a lot of clips and bits and reviews and this and that of Season 1, enough to convince me not to go anywhere near it. And Season 2 ain't looking a whole lot better either. And it's really unfortunate because they didn't get the rights that they really needed to secure to tell the stories that they're trying to tell right now. And they screwed it all up. And of course, this is the age and day where modern writers feel they have, better ideas and a better way of telling stories than, classic authors. And they take these IPs and ruin them. And it's really quite sad. Anyway, so that's happening. And I thought I'd comment on it because Season 2 didn't get any better than Season 1, apparently. And also, there is not going to be any Season 2 for Star Wars Acolyte. And I'm so sad about that. All right. So we will get to that. The other disorder that I mentioned that's not similar to ADHD, it's more of a categorization of a kind of behavior that occurs because of ADHD's emotional dysregulation. And that is called rejection sensitivity dysphoria, or RSD. I think that answers your question, Xian. We talked about that, and we'll be talking about that more, I am sure. It is something that absolutely fascinates me. Okay, so let's check out our Snuggles Not Struggles cam, because we always like to do that at the beginning of the show here and check in with Benson, my little wonder dog, our little wonder dog, really. He is definitely ours. And this is him outside of his little toy box there over in the living room space. And I was trying to just get some cam of him near his toys, and he of course obliged. And then I started doing a little bit of our tug of fetch here. But you know what he will do? He will sit there and he will do this first. You'll throw it out, and he will just slobber all over it. He won't bring it right back to you. That comes after a few tosses back and forth. But first, he has to sit and kind of do that whole thing. And I've always found that to be kind of hilarious that he does that before he gets back into the mode of just bringing you stuff. And then doing the actual fetch of back and forth, right? He'll get to that, but to start with, he has to kind of keep it. He'll play this whole little game with you of looking like he's bringing it, but then stopping short, right? Oh, no, you're gonna have to chase me for this one, and that kind of thing. It's always kind of fun. He's hilarious that way. So yeah. I don't know about you guys, by the way, but man, has it been buggy around here. We got grasshoppers the size of garden gnomes, and they come in the house even. Anyway, summer, fall, fall now, obviously, or is it? I don't even know, but it seems like we're in that in between period, and just bugs all over the place. And I have got some awful allergies going on, so if I need to blow my nose during the show here, you'll understand why. Oh boy, yeah. Once I started doing all this work in the backyard and stripping it down and getting all this crap out of there, because it was really a bit like a jungle back in our backyard. I've been wholesale stripping and pulling things and pickaxing bushes and trees and stuff and chainsawing stuff apart. And it's really made me aware of the ecosystem back there and the seasonal aspects of it, right? Where you see, certain bugs at the beginning of summer, and then throughout the summer it changes. And then now we're into fall, and now here come all these grasshoppers. And anyway, it's just been, it's been wild. Big grasshoppers. And they get in the house too, which is like, because they're not hideous. Grasshoppers are not horrible creatures. It's not like they're cockroaches or something, but it's annoying, and they jump. Oh my God, do they jump, right? You try to catch them and you can't, anyway, it's sorry, I digress. Let's go ahead and let's go ahead and get into some papers now. Yes, I brought papers. Of course I did. Let me say one other thing real fast, just to throw this out there, since it was so much on my mind this week. I don't know about you guys, but it's felt like such a massive shift in hope. In the last few weeks, it feels like things might actually... That there might be a future that has normal people in it leading this country, and I'm here for it, man. I'm 100% here for it. Okay, so but no matter what happens moving into our future, we can be sure that we are going to be plagued by predatory personalities, antisocial personalities, narcissists, and other fun types of people who like to see the rest of us as prey, as victims, as things that people they should be taking advantage of. Such people are a dime a dozen. They're out there in big numbers, and we need to be aware of them. And that's kind of the whole point, right? Is being aware of them. Yet one of the biggest problems that I have become so hyper aware of in the last few months has been ADHD, this condition that some people suffer from. 9% of the population, something like that, suffer from this condition. And there are some really interesting and very interesting numbers connected with all this. We're not going to get into that today, but I've been watching a lot of interesting stuff about ADHD. It's been on my mind a lot because it's something I was diagnosed with about a year ago, and I've been learning about it and learning bits and pieces about it. And the more and more and more that the picture becomes clearer and clearer as to what this is and what it does to you, the clearer it has become to me that this had a great deal of influence. My condition, my ADHD condition, had an incredible amount to do with my behavior in and around Scientology, growing up in it, being part of it, and eventually getting out of it. And I thought that this is something that we've talked about in terms of cult recovery. I've done a couple shows now about how ADHD, the condition or the symptoms of it can really get in your way in very, very significant ways when it comes to cult recovery, when it comes to like getting through or getting, out of or free of the belief systems and the emotional investment and the habits and all the crap, right? But it presents challenges, let's say, that are added on top of what might already be considered to be a very, very challenging experience for anybody. Yeah, it's hard. And ADHD doesn't make it any easier. And because there's a significant enough part of the population that suffers from this, it's worth talking about. But also because of the fact that I happen to believe, this is just my own personal take. Well, let me back up a second. I dived into the literature this week, and I didn't do the most exhaustive, literature review that you could do. I did searches for this, and I could not find a single paper that addressed ADHD and cultic phenomena. Whether, joining cults, being part of a cult, getting out of a cult, any phase of the cult activity, this does not appear to be a studied topic. I couldn't find literature on it. If it exists and you guys have seen or know about it, please do email me or message me or whatever and send it my way. I'm very, very interested in this and any research that's been done on it. There have been studies done, and I'm going to be looking at and reading some of them. There have been studies done about ADHD and religiosity and tendencies in that direction. But it appears to me, from what I'm reading and seeing, that there are contradictory reporters on this topic. Some people say ADHD makes it so that you're kind of cult proof or religious proof, or that it has no, or others are, no, there's no bearing at all on it. ADHD doesn't affect whether a person becomes a believer or has faith or has belief. And other studies say, no, it does seem to. So I don't know. I got to go through it all and with a fine-tooth comb, break it down a little bit more. But my own personal take right now, yes, there is that business about also the interpersonal and intimate partner violence, abusive romantic relationship stuff, and the fact that, yeah, it's more likely with perpetrators and victims. So interesting data, but not a lot of research on this yet. This is not a well-studied, thoroughly studied, settled science situation. So I'm going to throw some of my own thinking into the mix on this today. And I don't think it's super controversial. I am a person who has observed cultic phenomena for a long time, ADHD as a phenomena for less time, but in myself and others, trying to kind of connect some dots here. And let's see how we do. I'm not trying to say definitively that if you have ADHD, you are absolutely a sucker for cults and you're going to fall into them and it's hopeless. That would be a silly thing to say. I have no basis to say that. But I do believe that the symptoms of ADHD do make a person more potentially susceptible to cult recruitment. I believe that is the case. But we need more work on that. But let's go ahead and talk about why? Why would that be that way? And also, what kind of effects would it have on someone in a cult situation? And I'll talk, of course, about Scientology. But I think a lot of what I would say would apply across the boards to multi-level marketing, to large group awareness trainings, to other cults, religious or not, and other intense group experiences. How does ADHD rub up against that or interact with that? Well, let's take a look. First off, one moment. Sorry, guys. All right. So what I thought we'd do is kind of go through some of the symptoms or problems or behaviors of ADHD and take a look at how they connect up with cults. Impulsivity will be our first step here. ADHD symptom impulsivity involves acting quickly without thoroughly considering the consequences. Now, you've heard me rattle on and on for years about, thinking through the consequences of your actions, intended and unintended. And you've also heard me say many, many, many times that everything I'm saying to you guys, I'm pretty much talking to a mirror. And actually, the fact of the matter is that as I'm sitting here talking to you right now, I am talking to a mirror. I can see myself right there. And so all of the things that I've been talking about when it comes to impulsivity have been advice for myself as much as it has been for anybody else. And this is one of the reasons why, is because I have been an impulsive person most of my life. And ADHD drives that. It can drive a lot of impulsivity, a lot of like, oh, I got to act now. I should act now. This is a good thing to do. Let's do it, right? And you dive right in and you feel emotionally satisfied by doing that. That's why, at least for me, pretty much why I've acted impulsively is because it feels good in the moment to do it. It feels right, feels true. I'm thinking and acting and being decisive and being, forward thinking and progressive and all these things I tell myself in the moment that I'm being impulsive. And so a big part of, one of the things that, is a big deal about critical thinking is that it helps you to slow down and stop and think and, okay, what are the consequences of this? Where is this going to go? What's going to happen? And try to put those brakes on to your decision making and really think things through. And this fights, this is just rubbing right up against that real urge to be impulsive. It's a very overpowering thing when it's happening. It really can be, at least. So with cults often prey on people during vulnerable moments, creating emotionally intense situations. For example, love bombing, where impulsive decisions feel like the right choice. For instance, a person with ADHD might be attending a cult seminar, and after a powerful emotional speech by the leader, impulsively commit to a life-altering decision, such as donating a large sum of money or moving into the group, joining the Sea Org, right? How does that happen? Conversations, that's how it happens. Recruiters or cult recruiters will come in and they will just overwhelm you with experience and with imagery and with feelings and intense ones, and all in an effort to push you toward making the decision they want you to make, of signing up, starting, changing your life. The need for instant relief from a sense of isolation or confusion might lead to rash actions. Oh, by the way, here's my dad joke for the week. Totally forgot to give this to you earlier. I was sharing this with friends today or earlier this week, but I thought that perhaps if I got some poison oak and I threw in a whole bunch of 4-leaf clovers, that I might be able to give myself a rash of good luck. Oh, that was bad. Okay. Back to our regularly scheduled programming. So a person with ADHD might sign a membership agreement or enroll in a commitment-based program after a single conversation or an emotional event without taking time to reflect on the decision, only realizing the implications much later. And when I was reading and looking through this, I was thinking to myself that one of the reasons why I will say that cults, that ADHD can maybe have a higher degree of susceptibility to joining cults is because we were actually looking for people who we could do this to. One and dones, right? Sign them up now, get them in, get them started. We want the people who are impulsive. In other words, we are sort of, what's the word? Selecting for, right? In evolutionary terms, right? We are getting people in for seminars or workshops or one-on-ones, but we're looking for the people who are going to be impulsive. And so I think the selection filtering process of cult recruitment tends in that direction of looking for that, right? Which is why you might have a higher percentage of the population represented within cults who have ADHD than it exists, you know, in the greater world. All right. All right, cool. Now, what's another symptom of ADHD? What's another behavior of this? How about inattention? This is a wild one, right? Because you want, even when you want to focus on something, or you want to have your attention, or you want to be doing a job, or you have this desire to, you can't, right? It's really strange, but it's and it can be incredibly frustrating as a person to experience this, because. Right? So inattention can manifest as difficulty focusing on tasks, forgetting important details, or being easily distracted. Yeah, I pretty much demonstrate that all the time, here on camera as well as off. And just part of the condition, right? Your attention bops around. So cults often bombard new recruits with long lectures. Remember, Steve Hassan even talked about, you know, these 3-day, 4-day, 5-day, off in the woods in some cabin, you know, they just droning on and on and on at you for days on end. This is cult recruitment. They still do that kind of stuff. Long lectures. I mean, even the LGAT, the large group awareness training stuff, right? You're in there all day and night, you know, for a few concentrated days where they just own you and own your attention. So cults often bombard new recruits with long lectures, rituals, and complex ideologies that are designed to overwhelm. It's true, they are. Even the recruitment seminar workshop that I used to give, where I would, or start briefing, I guess is the word I should use. Even the recruitment briefing that I used to use as a Sea Org member would take hours and hours to deliver. And you would, and when we were just bombarding this person, the recruit, with information. A person with ADHD might struggle to keep track of the group's teachings, allowing the cult to selectively emphasize certain information while glossing over contradictions or questionable practices. Sometimes they do tell you things, but, you know, as somebody with ADHD, you might not, it might just go right over your head, you know? They might also miss cues about manipulation tactics that others might notice. This is also really important, as I have noticed not a small number of people out there who are almost what you would consider blind to social cues. And this isn't specifically, I don't think, just an ADHD thing, but it's a thing that happens out there. Oh yeah, somebody's commenting here, I'm super easy to hypnotize. I wonder if it's an ADHD thing. You know, maybe. ADHD plays interesting havoc with a person's mind. And I think that there are different manifestations from person to person with it. But yes, I do believe, because of the attention dysfunction, you could say, of ADHD, that I think it could make some people more susceptible to hypnotic trance induction, and maybe other people, on the other hand, less susceptible to it because of their inability to focus attention. Where, yeah, but I wouldn't want to make too generalized of a statement about that. But yeah, for sure. They are not supposed to leave. Red Pill 3000 asks, can someone attending an LGAT leave when they want to? No, they're not supposed to. And there are some places where if you get up and violate those rules in the middle, then they'll just not let you back in. Like, okay, well, out you go. So it might depend on the forum leader or seminar leader or whatever, or the situation, and also the time period. There have been times when it's not okay, times when it is okay. Experience, may vary, right? Your results may vary. Hypnotic trance induction is basically the creation of a trance state of focused attention, hyper-focused attention, because as I understand it, that's basically a definition for understanding of what a trance state is. And and then using that, if we're talking about hypnotic trance induction, then that implies that you're then going to do something to or with the person as a result of inducing the trance. You're doing it for a reason. You want to install ideas or affirmations or suggestions to the person in a way that they will accept it with less or no critical thinking or skepticism. It's just going straight in, right? That kind of thing. I don't mean to dumb it down. I'm just trying to summarize, but yeah, that's kind of what we're talking about there. So cults can bombard people with all this big stuff, and they can miss the cues and all that. For example, during meetings, the person might zone out during critical explanations about the group's goals, but still participate enthusiastically in communal activities. As a result, they may not notice shifts in the group's rhetoric or catch moments when the cult's demands begin to escalate, making it easier for them to be drawn deeper into the group. People with, I will say, my experience has been of this condition is that my feelings have been even more noticeably or easily driving me than my thinking, in terms of, because of this inattention and inability to stay focused when I need to all the time, I have compensated for it by using my feelings or my pre-existing knowledge of a thing to reassure myself, tell myself it's okay, it's fine. This is a good group, like with Scientology. Maybe something bad is happening, or maybe let me think about how I want to say this. I know there have been many, many instances where I knew I wasn't really getting what was going on around me. Maybe it was at an event. Maybe it was at a briefing. Maybe it was at a meeting in the Sea Org, right? This is in Scientology, I mean, where data or something, there was something I'm supposed to get or understand or be, but I didn't. And I knew I didn't because I couldn't stay focused on it. But my feelings deep down were that this was because this was such a good, wonderful, awesome thing that I didn't need to worry about it. It doesn't matter because I know in my heart of hearts, going with my feelings, that this is the place to be. This is the thing to do. They're right. I don't even have to think about it. I don't even, like you come to the snap decision that, oh yeah, they're right. They're good. Whatever David Miscavige is saying, 2 thumbs up, right? And I didn't even know what he was saying, but I didn't have to. That's kind of what I'm, that would be how I would often deal with things when this would be happening to me in Scientology, is I would just kind of go into a blind faith situation and it doesn't matter. It's all good, right? And that would cause me to gloss over or miss entirely important facts and events that should have had an impact on me, but didn't because I wasn't paying attention, literally. And it's really hard in retrospect to see this, by the way, even when you're trying to deal with your bullshit later, or trying to look back and remember and deconstruct the experience and try to figure out what happened to you and all that, like we do with cult recovery. You will forget about and not even have bookmarked in your mind those instances. And it can be really hard to remember them when you weren't paying attention in the moment. There's no memory to hook back to. Okay. So anyway, that's something that happens in and out of cults with that problem. Let's take a look at the next thing here. Hyperfocus. It's a symptom of ADHD, right? Hyperfocus is an intense focus on a particular task or subject to the exclusion of everything else. It's getting in the zone. And if you've been in the zone, you know what I'm talking about, right? And I think a lot of people who have been in the zone, hyper-focused, are people with ADHD. You don't have to have ADHD to be hyper-focused, but it sure makes it easier. Unfortunately, the problem is that you don't always have control of what you're going to be hyper-focused on. And that's where your life becomes not completely your own when it comes to this condition. Okay. There will be days where I have planned for writing or research or work I want to do. And then, then the next day I go to sit down to actually do it. And there's just not a chance in hell it's going to happen. Right? Because perhaps on that day, my attention has decided to, instead of being dispersed all over the place, to be hyper focused on something that has nothing to do with my research or my writing. And that day is shot. As far as that work goes, maybe I get some other work done somehow through this, but it ain't that work, that sucks. But when it comes to being in a cult, how does this work, right? Or how can this work? Well, once hooked into a particular aspect of the cult, for example, the teachings or the ideology or the mission, individuals with ADHD might become hyper-focused on these elements. And let me now hearken back to when I was in and did have times, days, sometimes even like a week at a time, where I wasn't thinking about anything but this one thing I was doing for Scientology. That happened a few times where I was just so hyper-focused that I would even keep myself up half the night, driven on getting this project or target or work done. And that was when it felt like I was super powered. That was when it felt like I was like a Scientology superhero or something, right? Because I was just in the zone, right? 5 by 5. I'm just so concentrated on what I was doing. And those times were times when I would sell myself on my spirituality, because that's how I interpreted it. I was a Thetan, and I was focused, and I was locked in, and this is theta power. This is how I would interpret my ADHD in Scientology, is I was theta powered. I am on it. And that happened a lot. Yeah, it happened enough that it's noteworthy. They may spend excessive time studying the cult's materials, fixating on specific goals, or becoming obsessed with pleasing the leader. I remember when I was doing my supervisor training for the second time, I think I did it 3 times, and I decided that I needed to make my target every single day that I was on this particular course that I was on. Every day when you're in class in Scientology, the supervisor comes and gives you a target. And at the beginning of your classwork, the supervisor will, based on your schedule, target out your entire check sheet so that you'll have the completion date and the dates you're supposed to hit before that, so you know whether you're on track to meet that completion target. They like to focus attention that way in Scientology. And when it would sink in, when it would hook with me, I was on it. And this particular time, I was up until 2 a.m. I didn't matter. I wasn't stopping until that target was met every single day. And I was so riveted to it. I mean, I remember it. There was nothing else on my mind but that for about 2 straight weeks. And I conquered that check sheet. I mean, that thing was my bitch. Nobody did what I did. It was really quite impressive, if I say so myself. It was a pilot program. But this was a case where I can remember so clearly being so hyper focused on what I was doing. And it was, like I said, I felt like a superhero, because it happened to be that confluence of events was my hyper focus was finally, servicing me, because sometimes it does. Sometimes it doesn't. I'd say most of the time it doesn't, but when it does, this deep engagement can isolate the cult member from outside perspectives or loved ones who might offer counter arguments. So, for example, someone might hyper-focus on achieving a spiritual goal promised by the cult. How often do we see that? Often enough that it's noteworthy, right? People who will, working professionals who will hyper-focus on getting onto or through an OT level, or getting to clear, right? And and there's a period of time where they just nose to the grindstone, right? It can be really powerful times. Yeah, basically, this focus could consume them to the point where they neglect family, work, or other responsibilities, believing that achieving the cult's vision is the most important task. All the above, right? With what we see with Scientologists and stuff. Okay, few more behaviors here to go over. I hope this is interesting stuff for you guys. Certainly has been for me. All this stuff has been like, just, how do I put it? It's really been clarifying an awful lot of my experience in the group. That's why I keep talking about this stuff, because I really feel like if I'm hitting all this, then it must be for other people too, right? They must have something to do with this too. All right, so let's talk about the next one here. Need for stimulation. This is another ADHD characteristic, is a need for stimulation. People with ADHD often seek out stimulating environments or experiences. Gee, I wonder how that has anything to do with cult recruitment, right? Cults create environments filled with emotional highs and lows. Intense group rituals, chanting, singing, extreme bonding experiences, and dramatic proclamations by leaders. These highly stimulating environments can feel satisfying for individuals with ADHD, who may find mundane routines difficult to endure. The novelty and excitement offered by the cult may feed their need for constant mental stimulation. If, for an example, a person with ADHD might find the dynamic nature of cult gatherings thrilling and addicting, right? Events, anyone? I love them, right? They look forward to the emotional intensity of the rituals or the speeches, and the environment might feel far more engaging than the typical, less stimulating social settings that they encounter in daily life. Auditing is this for people. I'll tell you what, say what you will about auditing, and I've certainly said a lot about it, but one thing it is not, is it's generally not boring. And I know that watching it can be boring. And I know that when it goes on and on, like Reckless Ben did, right? Where he went in there for like a 8-hour session or something. Like that can really be a rough go for sure. But most of the time, auditing is not a slugfest like that quite, And it's, at least my experience of it wasn't like that. And it can be quite a mentally stimulating journey for somebody to go 30 million years down the time track and you let their imagination run wild as to what's happened to them. This is the kind of experience that, for me in my, more ADHD moments, let's say, was like a peak experience. I mean, there's let's not forget that along with auditing, or a key part of auditing is inducing some really extreme emotional experiences, highs and lows. And this, the ADHD brain eats this stuff up. It's a wonderful, wonderful experience for stimulation, and the ADHD brain sort of craves that. Right, from time to time, it certainly does. It's between that and the attention deficits, right? You really can find yourself kind of bouncing around, even in the house. You can feel like a little like uncomfortable in your own skin sometimes, And the experience that an auditing session can provide a person, and I'm sure this is true for other groups too, where they do the chanting or the meditations or the ritualistic activities or the de-dinging or the whatever they're doing. that is the practice of the cult, right? It can really satisfy that need for stimulation. Yeah, let's put it that way. Okay, cool. Okay, difficulty with executive functioning. Executive dysfunction includes challenges with organizing tasks, managing time, planning, and regulating emotions. It's like your brain, your organizer, right? The little guy up there that kind of takes care of everything and organizes, master planner type, right? That guy, he ain't coming to work every day. So cults often impose rigid schedules and strict guidelines, which can relieve the stress of managing one's own life. Yeah, I mean, sometimes I really needed that structure that Scientology provided. For someone struggling with executive functioning, the clear structure and rules may seem like a helpful solution. The leader might dictate daily routines, clothing choices, and behavior, decisions the person with ADHD may have struggled to manage on their own. Could not have described it better. The structure of musters and eating times, and you have to have your body here at this time. And this was something that was true for me as a Scientologist almost from the very beginning, because the classwork of Scientology is where I spent so much of my time as a student, initially as a public Scientologist, and then when I joined staff, I trained quickly, within the first year or two, to become a course room supervisor. And I was teaching and supervising the Scientology classwork. So my schedule was rigidly controlled to the second. And I had a watch on all through the 80s, 90s, and 2000s, telling me precisely to the second what time it was. And I would rigidly control my life with the course room scheduling, because I had to call the roll and it had to be precisely on time. So everything aligned around that. And it's interesting how after leaving Scientology, I had this total freedom, and it was too much, and I was very overwhelmed by it. And one of the things that helped bring order back into my life and sort of put me on a different tack was starting a YouTube channel and having a release schedule and having to meet it. It was interesting. And I only see all this in hindsight, right? I wasn't doing any of this on purpose, thinking, oh, ADHD, I need structure, let me do this. That's not how it happened, right? It just felt good and felt right and helpful to me to be given a template for my life. And this is where you need to be, and this is how you need to be, and this is how you need to be dressed, and and you better be fed, and you better, right? The controlling environment of the Sea Org, especially staffed to a degree, was something I felt I needed. Emotional satisfaction from that, right? Except for all the times that I didn't. I tell you all the positive. Now, let me tell you that even that structure that Scientology provided often felt orderly, but then it could have many, many times where it felt constricting, choking, suffocating, right? Where I felt like I couldn't move or breathe. And those were very, very, very stressful, anxious, difficult times for me, also because of the ADHD. So, sometimes it can really feel like an alignment with your condition and helping it until it's not, it's not helping. And because I didn't have adequate, free will and choice, self-determinism, as a Sea Org member especially, right? I had to stay on the base. I had to stay in uniform. I had to stay on post when, many, many times when I had no desire to do so at all. That because they remove, your power of choice over so many things, it's imprisoning. really. It's not helpful in the long run to be part of a group that's controlling you to such a degree, micromanaging your life, let's say, right? You don't need that to provide structure in your life as somebody with ADHD. But for a period of time, I'm sure you can see how it felt like, oh, this is helping me. This is good. This is providing structure. Okay. And again, at the time, I didn't think about it that way at all. I didn't know I had ADHD. I didn't think I needed structure in my life. But if I had ever thought about it at all, I always framed it in terms of, I joined Scientology staff when I was 17 years old. I was very young and I didn't really know a lot. And so the structure for me helped me feel like it felt like a feature, not a bug at first. It felt like, oh, somebody's kind of guiding me and directing me and mentoring me. Like this was more the flavor of how I would think about what was happening with this structure being laid on my life, which is why I accepted it and embraced it at the beginning, but over time, it becomes a straitjacket of control, and you realize that, and then you're stuck, and then you're trapped in it. And, that's kind of I hope that communicates what I'm trying to communicate about my experience with that particular aspect of this. Okay, emotional dysregulation. Now, this we spent a lot of time talking about when it came to the rejection sensitivity dysphoria the other week. But there's more to it than that. Emotional dysregulation involves difficulties in managing emotions, leading to mood swings, frustration, and sensitivity to rejection. So there's a number of things that go on here. Cult leaders often use emotional manipulation to maintain control over members, such as alternating between praise and harsh criticism. Right? That whole trauma bonding thing. A person with ADHD might be especially vulnerable to love bombing, where the group showers them with affection only to withhold it later, playing into their sensitivity to rejection. Emotional highs and lows within the cult can keep them in a constant state of needing approval. And I cannot describe what happened to me as a staff member better than what I just read to you, because I lived and died off of the approval of my senior. And she was a great lady. She was a wonderful woman. I don't have anything against her. In fact, she's out of Scientology now. So there's no ill will here, but I must tell you that when I was a staff member in Santa Barbara, I would do anything for her approval. And she wasn't even lording it over me. This is the horrible part. I did this to myself because I craved approval so badly, because I was so sensitive to criticism and rejection. And if there's one thing that Scientology is not short on, it's criticism and rejection. They pile it on. And it's always well-meaning, but it's still what it is. And when you have an ADHD condition, man, your emotions are all over the place when you're getting criticized and rejected. And so I would do anything to avoid those feelings, including staying up all night, if I had to get the production done, to get the number on the wall on the statistical graph, so that she would smile and be happy with me for another week and another and another, and I would brutalize myself inside. I was my own worst enemy when I was feeling like I was in the doghouse with her. And this was not her doing this to me on purpose. This was my ADHD tuned into and working for the cult. Those negative feedback loops and that self-criticism and self-judgment that I would lay on myself daily just happened to fit with the cult dynamic perfectly. And it became a self-reinforcing kind of mechanism, you know, and that drove my behavior, a lot of my behavior for those 8 years that I was on staff. And then it transferred over to the Sea Org. And as a Sea Org member, I was in that same position of desperately craving, you know, admiration, attention, positive feedback. You know, I needed it. And now I understand why. You know, it was an unhealthy thing. It is an unhealthy thing. Doesn't mean it's not going to happen to you, or that your brain's not going to do it to you if you and if you have ADHD and other disorders and other conditions also cause this. You know, your emotions can be not under your own control, and you set conditions for your own happiness and your own sort of you know, life. Anyway, you just make unreasonable demands on yourself constantly. And the cult, of course, is never, ever, ever going to step in and say, you need to take a break. You need to give yourself you know, you need to stop. You need to, you know, why don't you take a vacation? Why don't you take a day off? They're never going to do that. Unfortunately, you're also in an environment, in a cult, where they are going to consume every ounce, every jewel of energy you have to give, they're gonna take. So they're never gonna give you a break or tell you to stop or slow down or hold off or pay attention to your mental health or your physical health. They're gonna take and take and take. So it's the worst possible place for you to be when you suffer from this condition, right? When you have this emotional dysregulation and how that manifests. I just explained how it manifested for me. It may manifest in other ways for you and your own experience in a cult, but it's something to think about. Okay. Search for, and this is related to this next one, of course, search for connection and acceptance. Many individuals with ADHD experience rejection sensitivity and may long for social acceptance and understanding. Boy, did I. And you guys know my upbringing, you know, and the way that I was constantly striving for the acceptance and approval of everyone around me. It's what drove my entire childhood. And I gotta tell you, until the last few months, I did not know that. This is really clarifying stuff. Learning about this stuff is amazingly clarifying. So in terms of cults, of course, cults often present themselves as accepting, loving communities, but they are not. They are not. They are the opposite, right? They pretend that there's unconditional love and acceptance, but there are nothing but conditions. Individuals with ADHD who may have felt misunderstood or isolated in other social environments may be drawn to this promise of belonging. The cult becomes their primary social circle, filling a deep emotional need for connection. Example, a person with ADHD might be drawn into a cult because of promises that they are special and chosen for a higher purpose. This was part and parcel of my recruitment into staff in Santa Barbara. Save the world. You are the bomb. Remember, I've described this before. If you haven't heard, I talked about how for days on end, these adult people that I respected, I was 17 years old. I had, my job experience was Burger King. My life experience was high school. I didn't know anything. And my social interactions were rejection and disappointment over and over and over again. I couldn't fit in. I had a very, very small circle of friends. I'm talking a handful. And they were really good friends. I really liked the friends I had, but I only had a few of them. And I longed for acceptance and for social groups to want me to be part of them and stuff. And they never did. I wasn't that guy. So Scientology love bombing me for days and days I never experienced anything like it. And so you talk about needs being fulfilled. Oh, baby, right? Acceptance, community, support. It was nothing but I couldn't sign up fast enough. And I couldn't understand why my parents didn't want me to. That was why we fought. I so needed it that I was willing to fight and even like move out of home to get this. And that's actually what got me on staff. Again, clarifying, I couldn't have explained it this way 5 years ago. I talked about it differently because in my own mind, I, trying to figure out what happened and how it happened, you only have you only know what you know. And so I was not able to relate it to this condition. And yet this condition had everything to do with why I made the decisions that I made. So pretty interesting, right? Because it helps. The reason why so those were the points, by the way. And the reason why I bring these things up is not necessarily just to share my history with you guys, but because what I have found in the last the last year since I've gotten this diagnosis is that by learning about these things, I can make changes and adjustments in my life now that do help manage this condition. And not knowing about it before at all, of course, I couldn't do that. I was either over or undercompensating because I was misassigning why I was acting the way that I was acting, mostly in the direction of Scientology interpretations, because the cults will give you no shortage of the guru's explanations for why you're all fucked up. And ADHD isn't usually part of that package of explanation from L. Ron Hubbard or, Werner Erhard or anybody, or Keith Raniere, right? They don't talk about this stuff. They talk about body thetans, and they talk about engrams, and they talk about your, I don't know, all the language that they use, right? They assign it to made up constructs and delusional ideas and spirits and quantum waves and sheets of energy and all this bullshit that has no reality at all, but it sounds like a good explanation to you because you don't know how else to explain it. So if this interpretation sounds good, oh, I'm glad somebody finally explained this to me, right? Well, no, they're not explaining anything to you. And that's the unfortunate part about being in a destructive cult is you think you have all the answers, and in fact, you don't have any. And those delusional answers don't add up, and they don't solve problems, and eventually you end up worse off than you were when you started, and you were already there for a reason, right? So the more you can learn about this stuff, the more self-awareness I believe that we have, the more you can come up with solutions to these problems that actually will work and actually will help you. For example, I have been mentioning for weeks now about the rejection sensitivity thing. So instead of feeling like I need to, what did I say? Gird my loins. I'm gonna man up. I'm gonna be disciplined. I'm gonna be strong so that I can deal with that criticism that I get online. No, you're not. All right. So instead, maybe just organize your life so that you're just not in front of that instead of creating this unrealistic expectation that you can't ever meet for yourself because of whatever. Instead, maybe manage things so that you don't have to deal with it because it doesn't rear its ugly head because you're not putting yourself in places where you're going to suffer from that, right? And here I might, like I'm talking about social media. If social media triggers you, don't put yourself in front of it, right? Is a better way of dealing with it, perhaps, than trying to convince yourself that you can, stand up to, the shellackings of the world. Because if you can't, you can't. And that's okay. You don't have to, And I didn't have that point of view for a very, very, very long time. I thought it was my own internal deficiencies and problems and issues, and I just needed to deal with my bullshit and handle it and rise above it and this kind of thing. Well, there's some things you're not going to rise above. There's some things you're just going to have to manage. And that's okay. We manage old age, right? We manage the aches and pains. It happens. There's nothing wrong with it, right? You just deal with what you got to deal with. So yeah, don't put yourself in front of the train coming down the track. You got it. You got it exactly. That's where I'm coming from. So, all right, folks. So that's what I wanted to share with you all this week. So thanks for coming around and listening to me go on about all this. Let's go ahead and take a look at our critical thinking cards, and then I will tell you about the podcast and stuff. So, okay, we did this one last week. Let's not do it again this week. Let's see here. Oh, here's an interesting one. Your bias. Your bias is reactance, it says here. You'd rather do the opposite of what someone is trying to make you do. When we feel our liberty is being constrained, our inclination is to resist. However, in doing so, we can overcompensate. Wisdom springs from reflection, folly from reaction. Wisdom springs from reflection, folly from reaction. Okay, I'll take that. All right, podcast this week, pretty good discussion. I think you guys will like it. Dr. Marcus Trammell, I believe his name is. We had a great talk about religious trauma and growing up in groups and stuff like that. He's a clinical psychologist. So that's the podcast tomorrow. I hope you guys will check it out. We had some really interesting things to talk about when it came to religious trauma and overcoming religious belief and trauma and stuff like that when it becomes destructive, right? The idea, as we said in the podcast, is not just because you have beliefs doesn't make you a bad person, doesn't make you a cult member, doesn't make you out of control, nothing like that. But let's be real, there are people who take this shit too far, and especially when it comes to dealing with their kids. And we had some things to say about that. So I hope you guys will check out the podcast tomorrow. And then we will do our critical Q&A on Sunday as usual. I hope you will join me for that. 1 o'clock on Sunday. And I believe I've got the internet connection problems sorted out now that we were having last week. All I had to do was reset my modem. So, okay. Hopefully that keeps everything in line. And with that, we'll wrap the show. All right, guys. Thanks for coming around. I'll see you next week. Bye-bye.